Good afternoon. We begin with some breaking news. A major water main break by Joint Base Pearl Harbor-Hickam is affecting the entire Navy water system.
That's right. That's about 93,000 users, including residents, facilities, schools, and the Pearl Harbor National Memorial. Now, early reports by officials say this all happened after a crash this morning at around 5 a.m. when a car hit a pipe, causing the main to break. Honolulu firefighters on scene tried to stop the water flow but couldn't. Now, this all comes on the same day the Navy was supposed to give an update on the first phase of its plan to defuel the Red Hill facility. That process is set to start on Monday. We sat down with Mahealani Richardson to discuss all of these developments before that announcement that they will be rescheduling that press availability, and here's what she had to say.
So, Mahealani, right now we know of a major water main break near Joint Base Pearl Harbor-Hickam. What's going on with that?
Well, Dylan, this is happened at about 5 o'clock this morning on Salt Lake Boulevard and Namur. And early social media reports were showing a fountain of water, a huge fountain of water, that water main break. And then when our crews got there a little bit later, we still saw water basically gurgling over a few feet high from the road there. And so the officials at Joint Base Pearl Harbor-Hickam are still trying to diagnose the problem. We're getting more information, but this is what's important right now. 93,000 water users at Joint Base Pearl Harbor-Hickam in Navy housing surrounding Pearl Harbor and in major businesses are not allowed to drink the water. This includes the Navy Exchange, that major shopping area, also the Arizona Memorial, and all of those visitor attractions. They are now closed because they cannot drink the water. Now, we spoke with military officials who said that in terms of this area, this 93,000 water users, they're being impacted differently. Some have no water service at all. Some have only partial water service. And we spoke to residents who live both at Hickam and in the surrounding areas like Radford Housing, and they say they woke up this morning and when they turned on their taps, only a little bit of water was coming. And so it's been very different for different people. But one common denominator, Dylan, is that people feel that this is deja vu. You remember that last year around Thanksgiving, 93,000 water users were told not to drink the water, and they weren't allowed to drink the water for several months because of those Red Hill fuel leaks coming from those Red Hill fuel tanks. And it just so happens today that the military was supposed to give us a tour of those fuel tanks down at Joint Base Pearl Harbor-Hickam because a defueling operation is set to begin. But earlier this morning, I spoke to a resident, Lou, who lives at Radford Housing, and she is very frustrated, very angry that they can't drink the water. And here's what she had to say.
My gut reaction is, is this happening all over again? Are we going to continue to have leaks everywhere to where we're going to be, if we're not still contaminated, we're going to be contaminated again? How can we trust that the defueling process is going to go without another leak when, we keep having sporadic things happening to make the water or the sewage or whatever leaking everywhere? And I think everybody's concerned that when the defueling process does start, that's then going to cause another leak. And I just feel very scared. We still have another year left here, and just scared for my family because there doesn't seem to be any, it's like deja vu. It's happening all over again.
So that resident, obviously Lou, is very frustrated about today's water main break. She's very frustrated about the previous fuel leaks from last year. And you may recall, Dylan, there was a wastewater leak into Pearl Harbor. And so all of this is really wearing down on residents who feel that they've been impacted several times by many failures because of the Navy.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of setbacks. Mahea, also, do we know of what schools are impacted at this time?
Well, we contacted the Department of Education, and a spokesperson says that Iroquois Point Elementary is impacted, but we're not really sure what exactly that means. You know, this is a very dynamic situation, a very fluid situation. Now, at this point, we're not hearing of any school closures, but we do know that Iroquois Point is impacted, according to that spokesperson. You may recall last year, several schools are on that Navy water line, and they were shut down for a little bit, and then they got back into action, and they had to go for several months just using bottled water. Now, we don't know how long this water main break situation will last, but we'll definitely keep you updated.
A lot to follow here. The other headline today that we were supposed to focus on was about the defueling plan. This is obviously another layer on top of that, but what do you know so far about that defueling plan?
Well, military officials were supposed to give the media a tour today because on Monday, the unpacking of the lines, that's basically removing fuel from the pipelines that go from Red Hill down to Joint Base Pearl Harbor-Hickam, that's supposed to happen on Monday, and we were supposed to be allowed to see how that operation was going to happen. So the military, the Joint Task Force, which is now in charge of defueling Red Hill, on Monday is scheduled to defuel those lines. That's about 1 million gallons of fuel. And then after that starts a very long process of fixing the lines and making sure all of the necessary repairs are done before the complete defueling operation is supposed to start. They say, the military still says, that the entire defueling of more than 100 million gallons of fuel from the Red Hill tanks is supposed to be finished by July 2024. And so, you know, honestly, Dylan, we're still waiting for word from the military if we are even going to be allowed onto Joint Base Pearl Harbor-Hickam. But certainly there are a lot of questions that we have for them today in terms of what happened with this water leak, what happened with that. Are we still going to be allowed to go onto Joint Base Pearl Harbor-Hickam? And will Monday's unpacking of the lines still happen as scheduled?
For sure. One more question for you, Mahia. You've been on this Red Hill water crisis for quite some time, almost since the beginning of it. And as you mentioned, the Navy sets the timeline to be done by July 2024. What has the community response been around that timeline?
Well, that timeline by the Navy was actually shortened by 6 months. If you talk to folks like the Oahu Water Protectors, they say that Red Hill needs to be defueled now because that 100 million gallons of fuel is sitting 100 feet above the aquifer. And throughout this process, you know, the Department of Health is involved because they need to approve of all of the steps for this defueling process. And so the big concern from the community, I talked to Senator Schatz, he's worried that this could get bogged down in bureaucracy as we've seen before. And so he's concerned, and the Department of Health has said every day that goes on is another existential threat or a threat to our water system.
Our Mahealani Richardson, thank you so much for the details on the ongoing Navy water crisis. We'll bring you the latest details on the Hawaii News Now mobile app.